Hello, everybody. This is Bishop John Selders,
And this is Pamela Selders.
and welcome to our inaugural, our first episode of the Half Hour Show. We've been talking about this, Pamela and I, for a little while. It's actually Pamela's idea to have a moment where, as the leadership of More Monday CT, we spend just a little time on the things that are important to us. We message out, we talk to you who listen, support, and cheer us on as we do the work of justice here in Connecticut, but not just here in Connecticut, all over the United States and across the world. And so we wanted this opportunity just for a short time to hear from our friends, our partners, our guests, our supporters, the other leadership in More Monday CT. And so here it is, the Half Hour Show.
We also wanted to encourage you, inspire you to hop on in and get involved. You know, right now, there's so much going on, and we need everybody, mind and spirit, to connect and help us change everything, because lots needs to be worked on.
Absolutely. So let's bring on our first guest, our friend, our brother. He is a founder with us of More Monday CT. He was in the room when we had the first conversation about a thing that we now call More Monday CT. Let's just bring him in from the green room, if you will. The Reverend Josh Pawelek, who's the senior minister for the Unitarian Universalist Society East. Come on in the room, brother. Welcome to the first Half Hour Show.
All right, it's an honor and a pleasure to be the inaugural guest. I'm very pleased with that. It's always good to see both of you.
Absolutely. So many of you don't know, and so that's what we wanted to talk about. We have been engaged and involved in a lot of groups and organizations and efforts over the course of the last now nearly 7 years, right? More Monday is 7 years old or something like that. And during this time, one of the places and spaces we've been gathered in and around has been around a group of folk who've been organizing and providing leadership in faith communities and in community organizations and labor. And we've been engaged in a long-term conversation. Reverend Josh and I, you would remember when we were clergy or faith leaders around a moral budget. I mean,
yep, clergy for a just budget.
That's right. This was years ago that we were out there and doing the work of really rallying people around what it looks like and what it should look like in relationship to faith and money and government, right? And so there is a new organization, relatively new, that's gathered itself around these ideas, and Reverend Josh is our More Mondays representative to that table. So we wanted to bring him on to have some conversation to talk about that organizing work and the work that's happening right now. This is hot off the press. We are happening right now. And so, Reverend Josh, take it away, man.
All right. Well, the coalition is called Recovery for All. And as you indicated, this is in some ways not a new effort. Prior to Recovery for All, we had the Do Justice Coalition, which was also seeking a more just and moral state budget. And there were different iterations prior to that. I think Clergy for a Just Budget is going back 10, 12 years now. But what it points to is the fact that in Connecticut, we have, I believe it is the worst rate of income inequality. So poor people, working people, middle-class people, the amount of money that they bring in, the amount of money that the average household has, the amount of assets the average household has is really, really low compared to the wealth and the income that the people at the upper echelons bring in every year. And the state budget can play a role in addressing that. And right now, the budget that has been proposed by our governor, Governor Ned Lamont, doesn't do anything about it, really. And this is a guy who ran on a platform of equity. he wanted to see greater equity. But as our good friend, Senator Gary Winfield says, equity requires revenue. So when we say recovery for all, we want to see some serious changes to the tax code, because the tax code drives income inequality, and it literally leads to suffering. It leads to pain. It leads to people who simply cannot make ends meet. And I want to say a little bit more, go a little bit into the weeds about what that looks like, if I may, unless you want to say anything before I go on.
I do, actually, because one of the things I think that is important as we set this up is that this conversation is not a new conversation. Mm-hmm. All right, that there have been efforts throughout the course of the last 40 to 50 years here in Connecticut, as I understand. We've just been here 21 years. So it predates our arrival here. But I will say to you that the struggle between the haves and the have-nots, and the political struggle in particular of the haves and have-nots, is not a new issue. And here in Connecticut, as it relates to taxation, all right, there's a fundamental disconnect, I'm going to call it, from folk who say, you know, the line that says something like, well, if you tax people, if you tax the wealthy, they'll just leave, right? Or if you mess with the tax code around corporations, they'll just leave. But I want to go way back, nearly 200 years ago, in 1824. In 1824, a black man, two of them, in fact, led an effort to say this: you tax me, you get my taxes, but you don't want me to vote. And there's something wrong with that. And he sued the state of Connecticut. His name was Isaac Glasgow. So I want to say that this struggle, this fight, is a 200-year-old fight around money and representation. And so we are just stepping into what has been the struggle. And I think as faith leaders, in particular, and as folk who are really working for a moral and a more just society, this is key to our work. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I also wanted to add to that, just like in the 1800s, you know, Black people supported, you know, their leaders, and the leaders then turned around and didn't do the right thing. We're living this out now with Ned Lamont, who only got into office because of the urban centers here in Connecticut, namely Hartford. And for him to come up with something that doesn't honor the work that was put in and the support that was given to him in order for him to have this seat, you know, it's just unacceptable.
I'm sorry, Reverend. All right, there you go.
It is unacceptable, and I think for a person who ran on an equity platform to not be pursuing equity, it's not just in income inequality, it's in healthcare, it's in education, it's in housing. It's unacceptable, and it feels tone deaf, and it feels like a slap in the face to so many of us who heard his message and said, this is the guy we want to vote for. We voted for him. He's not responding. He seems to be responding more to his neighbors in Greenwich, who likely are not the people who voted for him. Be my guess. So we at some point before we're done, we should talk about the myth of the millionaires who leave, because there's actually no data to support that claim. But before we get there, I think it's really important to make sure people understand just how strongly the tax code drives income inequality. All right, so the Department of Revenue Services issues a report called the Incident Report, and it shows the overall percentage of income that people pay in taxes, and it breaks it up into 10 deciles of folks in the state. So the bottom decile, so the bottom 10% of earners in the state of Connecticut is actually 725,000 households. Take that number in, 725,000 households. They earn an average of $24,000 a year. And they pay in taxes, and a lot of this is sales tax and the gas tax, things like that. They pay about $5,000. So right there, your 24,000 is at 19,000. Now, who can live on $19,000 a year, particularly if you got kids in Connecticut? It cannot be done. It cannot be done. That's 725,000 households. Now, the top decile is about 355 households. Their average income is 44 million. All right. Remember that about that approximately 5,000 that the bottom decile pays? That's about 18%, 20% of their income. The people in the top, they pay about 1.5% of their income in taxes. That's not fair. That is fundamentally unfair. And they can sustain a lot more in taxes, and they won't even know it. They won't even know it. And yet we have a system that drives money to them. It doesn't trickle down. Trickle down was debunked in the 80s. Ned Lamont is talking like a trickle downer. We don't have a downward trickle. We have an upward tsunami. And we see it most. Forbes magazine in March published the data on Connecticut's billionaires. There are 14 billionaires who've increased their wealth collectively by $12 billion. It's probably more now. That's how the tax code drives income inequality. And that's why Recovery for All is saying that's got to be fixed. And if we don't fix it, we're going to continue to we're just going to accelerate income inequality. We're going to accelerate the pain and suffering. We're going to accelerate people just being lost, not being able to hold it together, certainly not being able to save for retirement, save to put their kids through college. It's a pipe dream. And Governor Lamont's budget doesn't respond to that.
Mm-hmm. And I just also want to say, as a Black woman who understands that Black women shoulder the responsibility for ourselves, for our families, and for our community to get the very least to be at the bottom. We do have poor white people who are poorer or Black people in this $24,000 household income you're talking about. It's mostly us. It's mostly us. And so I don't want us to escape this conversation, not escape, but to have the conversation without talking about white supremacy racism that is a huge driver in this wealth gap. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's white supremacy culture that is allowing us to sort of turn the other way when the data is presented. White supremacy culture drives our willingness as a society to not do anything about it, because the people who are most impacted by this income inequality are people of color. It is a racialized gap. It is, and you're right. There are certainly poor white people, and there are poor white people who suffer from this. But when you look at those 725,000 households, they are majority people of color households. And so we cannot, we don't want to ignore that aspect of it. And so when we say recovery for all, a lot of people think, well, so we got to recover from this pandemic. And yeah, that's true. We want to recover in an equitable way, but the coronavirus pandemic is not the only pandemic. We know that there is a pandemic of racism, and that, as we've already acknowledged, that's not new. That goes back to the founding of the country and to the colonial era. And people, we still need to recover from that. Changing the tax code the way we're proposing would be one part of recovering from that. But obviously, there's got to be more than that.
So I'd like for you to just say, when you say white supremacy culture, could you say a little bit more about what you mean when you say that? And the reason why I ask is that if you ask 12 people, legislators included, what white supremacy is, what racism is, you will get 12 different answers. We're not on the same page. We don't understand what that really means, and how it manifests in our lives.
Me, it goes back to the founding. You had a state of Connecticut, a United States of America, founded by white men with property to serve the interests of white men with property. And we can document that. This wasn't a country for people of color. This wasn't a country for Black people. It wasn't a country for Native American people. It wasn't really even a country for women, although white women certainly benefited from the white men's privilege. And you got to ask, well, when did we actually change that? Right? So you had the Civil War, it ended slavery, but that was replaced by Jim Crow, right? So we ended slavery, but we didn't end white supremacy culture. It just took on a new form. And some people could argue, well, we had the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. Look at what's going on around the country, right? They're trying to put these voting restrictions back into place. So white supremacy culture is this behemoth that keeps trying to set up society so that it benefits white people and keeps people of color, Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, and others down, keeps them second-class citizens, keeps them in that group of 725,000 households that can't seem to earn more than an average of $24,000 a year and can't really make it on that. Of course, people do. People survive. People are incredibly resourceful. And I defy any of these billionaires to make it on $24,000 a year. They wouldn't know what to do. They wouldn't know what to do. Now, I'm getting away from your question, but it's the way that white supremacy culture is the way that society is structured so that it continues to benefit white people. And one of the ways we see that in Connecticut is in this tradition of home rule, these 169 separate municipalities. So you might have a place like Glastonbury, where I live, where the schools are relatively well funded. The people do pretty well. I don't know what the average income here is, but I bet it's fairly high. And they might claim to be liberal, a lot of them, and they might put Black Lives Matter signs in their lawn after George Floyd gets killed in Minneapolis. But when it comes time to change the tax code, when it comes time to share education funding in a more equitable manner, when it comes time for the insurance companies to make some sacrifices so that people actually have access to decent health care, when it comes time to put affordable housing into this town, suddenly it's home rule. Suddenly we don't want that. And there it is. It's white supremacy culture. That's how it works. And everybody, people will resent the allegation. No, I'm not racist. And you don't have to think you are. I don't have to think I am. But the system keeps working. It keeps doing what it was designed to do.
Yes, and a part of white culture or whiteness, is the idea that I'm, exceptionalized out of that. That's not me. I don't do that. You don't know me. That is racist to say that. And people don't know it. They don't understand that. Some people say, hey, I got the sign out there, you can't expect me to do everything. what I don't want to, miss out because I'm trying to help you. So all of this is a part of whiteness, the culture of whiteness. And yeah, there's so much more to be said about that, and we'll do another show on that. But thank you. I appreciate you giving your definition.
So we got just a little more time, a little less than 10 minutes, because this is a half-hour show.
The half hour.
So the question I want to lay and ask you, Reverend Josh. So the Recovery for All campaign, the group of folk that have been gathered around the table, there is labor. There are kind of some of the what I would call the traditional justice-minded, left-leaning folk. There are faith leaders. Could you talk about the makeup of the group of folk who are around the table? And the second part of the ask is, what is the next steps? What's actually happening at this point?
So you really named it. There's certainly a lot of leadership from labor unions in Connecticut, and that includes, SEIU 1199, 32BJ. It includes the university professors, AAUP, 4Cs. AFL-CIO. I hear all the acronyms and I forget which what all those letters stand for. The Connecticut Educators Association, and then you've got the some of the more traditional, what we call community organizations. So Universal Healthcare Foundation, Bridgeport Generation Now, the New Britain Racial Justice Coalition, just a lot of groups like that. And then there's some individual faith leaders. I think, to be honest, we've had the most trouble attracting faith leaders, congregations, and some of the regional organizations to be part of the coalition. And when it gets to next steps, certainly we don't think that this current legislative session is the end of our work. We're not going to get everything we want, and we're not sure we're going to get, anything we want. And we got to be in it for the long haul. So one of the things I would love to see us do is put some real serious staff time into doing base building among people of faith. I think the argument about white supremacy culture, about income inequality, is a moral argument, and it's one that faith communities ought to take in fairly easily. At least maybe that's my wishful thinking. But we've got neighbors who are lying on the side of a road in a ditch because they're getting their butts kicked every day, multiple times a day. And a lot of our colleagues are just walking right on by. They're just walking right on by, and they're not stopping to say, hey, what's wrong? They're not stopping to say, hey, what are the resources I have that I can make available to you? And really the bigger question is, who else is organizing for a more fair, more just Connecticut, for a Connecticut that is actively striving to overcome its white supremacy culture, for a Connecticut that is actually trying to address its massive income inequality, its education gaps, its racialized education gap, a Connecticut that is trying to overcome this broken corporate-driven healthcare system. I would love to see us really make the case to the faith community and build up the faith, the faith piece of the Recovery for All coalition, and I think we will do that.
Yeah,
we're working on it.
For me, you're absolutely right. There must be a response to the gospel as a Christian, right? Now, and I know that with our Jewish sisters and brothers, with our Muslim sisters and brothers, acts of giving and charity is built as one of the pillars for Islam. We get this idea of the cities of refuge from Judaism, right? That there is a way to restore people and make them whole, right? That's a core faith tenet in the practice of Judaism. And of course, Christians, Jesus was a Jew. So we inherit some of that. And yet we have folk that struggle with the idea that we maybe shouldn't mix faith and politics. And they bristle at the fact that some of us are more vocal and more public about our stance in relationship to policies and laws related to justice in this way. And I think it is fundamental to our faith, action, and response. It is what I believe God calls us to not only attend to in the Good Samaritan story, not only attend to the person who failed to the bandits on the road, but we got to talk a little bit about them bandits and that road and what the responsibility is to ensure that everybody that has safe passage along the road and that the road gets dealt with, that there's something going on in that road that propels the road to respond and to act in those ways. And that's something that we all have pay a part in that. So I know you are, Pamela and I, we're committed to leading and to encouraging our colleagues in particular to become more responsive. This is the way, this is the path to require a more equitable, a more just Connecticut means then that we have to show up. And we not only have to show up, we have to voice up, right? We have to write sermons. We have to lead our congregations in processes around that. But more importantly, we got to show up not just inside the house of worship, not just inside our spots, but also show up in the public square. Where are you when the town council is having conversations about more justice and more equitable and more fair ways of practice? Where are you when we make the call to show up at the Capitol here in Hartford to do the work that must be done because our faith compels us? And I'm not fussing a little bit. But what I am doing is cajoling that we're not being unfaithful. We, in fact, are being right on point. This is the faith response, the faithful and faith-filled response that I believe, in these days, God's calling us coming out of this pandemic. Shouldn't you see and know? Don't you feel the press that folk are hurting in ways we actually could fix?
And I appreciate that you said faith and faith filled, because it is not limited to clergy. It is open to people of conscience, people who understand that this is just not right. It is not the right thing to do. And I want to join in with the voices that are leading in a moral way, in regards to what is happening. So I just wanted to be sure to not give the impression that if you're not clergy, then you can't join this effort. And that's just not the truth. You are welcome as long as you recognize that there is something morally not right in what's happening.
That's right. Reverend Josh, we just got a couple of minutes left. We got about 2 minutes. What's your bestest close in this regard in around Recovery Fall?
Well, this conversation about the faith community is reminding me that one of the things the faith community does very well usually is our acts of charity, food banks, staffing homeless shelters, that kind of thing. But I think the faith community also needs to be aware of a little bit of hoodwinking that's going on. Meaning, why are we doing this? Why are we working on the housing? Why doesn't the government make affordable housing available? Why are we working on this issue of food insecurity? Why doesn't our system just make that a non-issue? Why are we doing the GoFundMe for the person that can't afford their healthcare deductible? We gotta be more clear about the systemic structural reasons people are poor. and why poverty is racialized in Connecticut. And then we need to do what I would call social justice work, social justice advocacy. We need to demand that it's not just about, you know, a person getting a meal. It's about a person having food security. It's not just about a person getting a bed in a homeless shelter. It's about a system that offers affordable housing. And I think we are called as people of faith to demand that and to expect that our government and our political leaders will work for that. And if they're not, why not? What's their argument? Is it because they're worried the rich people will leave? I know we didn't get to talk about that. I'm tired of that excuse, though. I'm just tired of like putting their needs first when we got so many people suffering. And so that's my close. Let's respond to the suffering. Let's change the system now. Let's make a recovery for all.
Thank you, Reverend Josh.
Thank you so much.
We're out of time. This won't be your last time. You will be back again and again. We look forward to the opportunities we have to share meaningful, impactful. Yes, we want to inspire you. Yes, we want to inform you. Yes, we want to extend the invitation to get involved. Yes, you gotta grow. We gotta grow into this what Dr. King called the beloved community. And, and in the beloved community, everybody has enough food to eat. Everybody has somewhere to live. Everybody has the right for health care. Everybody is cared for. Everybody gets their needs met. This is what I'm looking for. It's the call that I believe our God has called us to, and we're gonna stay on the case. As y'all have heard me say lots of things, we're gonna stay on the case. Thank you, Reverend Josh. Pamela.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All righty. All right. We'll see y'all. Peace.